Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. We're going to talk all about the React grid, much anticipated. We've been working on this new updated grid all year. We shipped it about a month ago, and it's available now for you to try out. So today's webinar, we're going to introduce you to the grid and show you how to make your way around the grid. Of course, as usual, my name is Jason Barris. I'm Senior VP of Developer Tools here at Infragistics. If you have questions, please use the chat window. And of course, the recording of the webinar and the slide deck will be sent tomorrow in a follow-up email. So when we talk about Ignite UI, we talk about the complete platform for modern web designers and developers. There's key aspects that make Ignite UI unique versus anyone else in the market today. We are design system based. So everything that you see on the screen also has a cousin or a digital twin, if you will, in the form of a UI kit for Figma or Sketch. We had Adobe XD. We still have Adobe XD. If you're still using it, that's getting phased out, and Figma is taking over because of Adobe's huge purchase there. But the idea is that you can include your design team in this development process all along the way. It's not a developer just trying to figure stuff out and then the designers kind of pushed off to the side. We really want that design to developer collaboration, and that's a primary focus of what we do with Ignite UI. And of course, App Builder, if you're new to Infragistics, you should check out App Builder. It really is what helps you create applications, 8 to 10 times faster than you could ever create on your own. And everything there is based on this design system. So of course, the fastest grids and charts on the planet. We're going to talk a little bit about that with the React grid today. And I want to highlight that Ignite UI is a platform. So you get the same features, APIs, docs, etc. on every platform. So if you are coming from, let's say, C#, WPF, and you want to go and do Angular, and then you're like, oh man, I want to switch up and do React, or I want to switch up and do Blazor, it's no problem. Everything on every platform with our controls is identical. So when you look at the grid and you look at, it has Outlook group by, and it has, column templates, the same capabilities available in Angular, React, Blazor, it doesn't matter. And if you've used any of our grids before and you see what I'm doing today in React, you're gonna be like, oh, that's like exactly the same. And that's the idea, is that because we are based on a design system, we are doing the same thing across the board. We're not having one API over here and another API over there. And of course, I did mention App Builder, accelerate your app dev time up to 80%. We're really not going to go too much into App Builder today. I do have a couple slides on it because of really what's coming. So before I get into my demo, I want to again really highlight that everything that ships in the Ignite UI products has UI kit in Sketch and a UI kit in Figma. Everything is identical on every platform. There's no weirdness on something is one way in React and it's another way in Blazor. No, Outlook group by works the same. Column pinning works the same. The APIs are the same. If there is a row cell edited event in Blazor, there's the same in React. We are in this transition phase. So for example, if you say, hey, you said everything identical, blah, blah, blah in the webinar, you're missing this thing in React. While React was just released, there are a couple things hanging off to the side that we haven't shipped yet, but we are shipping every couple weeks. So it's only a matter of weeks before we do have that parity on what you had in Angular or Blazor or web components in the React platform. So that is our goal though. So you don't have to sit there and make a platform decision up front, which is what happens a lot. A dev team gets together, they're building a new project, and they make a decision. We're going to go with React because of this component library. Well, you don't have to do that with Infragistics or with Ignite UI. Everything is going to be the same on every platform. So when you look at a grid like this, real-time updates, beautiful theming, Excel style filtering, all this good stuff, you're going to get the same capability on every single platform. So this grid, I am going to guess this is either a web component sample or an Angular sample, but doesn't matter. It could be any one of them because the capabilities and features are going to be the same. And I did mention App Builder, and I really want to highlight that with App Builder, you could start in with your design team in Figma or Sketch. you can import those designs into App Builder, or you can start from scratch with App Builder. It is a WYSIWYG tool. You don't need to start in Figma or Sketch, but you can if you want, if you're using or working with your design team. And then everything in App Builder gets to that production-ready pixel perfect code. As of today, we do not have React code gen in App Builder, but we will be shipping it in Q1. And with any luck, there will be a preview before the end of the year. No promises, but that's our goal. So Q1, expect the code generation targets to be in App Builder. And of course, with that, you get this design to code story, which we talk about a lot. Hey, your designer creates something with the App Builder UI kits, and they want it to look exactly like that when it goes out to customers. That's the point. Design teams go through a whole process. They make sure that the customer is included. They make sure all of the prototypes are built. Well, they want to make sure that whatever the dev team does is what ends up on the customer's desktop. And that's really where this design to code story matters. And that's why App Builder ends up being so important. So stay tuned. Today, you've got Angular, Blazor Server, Blazor WebAssembly, and Web Components. React is right around the corner, and I can't wait for React because I'm going to show you how to do all this today with the CLI. But with App Builder, I'm just dragging and dropping, opening up a template, right-click, and it's done. I don't have to really go through. I don't have to think. It just kind of happens because you're using a WYSIWYG tool, which really is the way to go. So when we talk about the React Grid, what are you getting? Well, I'm going to show you a bunch of these samples today. I'm going to show you how to implement a bunch of this in my demo, but it's the same thing that you have in the other platforms. We have a ton of UI components. They all have touch support, responsive web design support. Of course, the grid is built to be a real-time virtualized grid. All rows and columns are virtualized, so you don't need to worry about, oh, we have 400 columns and a million rows. We don't care. The grid can be used as a dumb display where you're doing all the stuff on the server and things are just being pumped out of the client, and then the end user is interacting with it. It's really up to you how you use the grid, but performance should never be an issue. And when we look at the types of grids, flat grid, tree grid, spreadsheet grid, and then coming soon, again, the hierarchical grid, which is in high demand, and we will be shipping that soon in React. Charting is in the product as well. We did a few webinars on charting across all platforms, and this is one of our very first cross-platform components. So everything that you get in even WPF, you're going to get in React when you think about what we do with charting. I'm going to show you some of our developer productivity tooling today with the CLI, because that really does accelerate how you can get started with the React Grid. And then everything that we do is on GitHub. You'll be able to look at the roadmap, the issues, the READMEs, etc., and all the links that make sense. And that's what I want to highlight before we jump into the demo. Our industry-leading support is really a differentiator. So we started using Discord maybe a year and a half ago, maybe a little bit longer, I'm not sure. It started out really slow. Now it's sort of like that snowball effect. Everyone's on Discord. So our product team is on Discord. Our customers are on Discord. Evaluators are on Discord. This is where you go to get real-time help from the product team. We have tons of information up there. The guys that actually build the product are the ones that are not only online right now answering questions, but are on Discord as well, answering questions. And we cover most time zones. So whether you're in Europe, the United States, South America, it doesn't really matter. You'll get an answer in a good amount of time. GitHub has discussions. GitHub also has READMEs, roadmaps, issues, like I mentioned. And then, of course, we have a YouTube channel with all kinds of webinars, how-to videos, etc. So helping you get to the outcome that you need as fast as possible is really our goal. And we think that we do that with all the options, besides having a great product and then coupling the components with App Builder, really enabling you to build and deliver applications faster. So with that, I'm going to jump into a demo and we'll take a look at the React Grid. The first thing I'm going to highlight is how to get to the React sample. So here I am at the infragistics.com homepage. I'm going to go to Design and Development, and I'm going to click React. So if you've used the website before, you know that we have all of the main homepage stuff, like you can jump down to the data grid, the data charts, etc. But the quickest way to get to all of the grid samples is to just click Data Grid. view all of the React samples, and then you'll be able to see here on the left-hand side, since we just released this new grid, everything has the new button on it. But also if I scroll up, we have our getting started using the Ignite UI CLI, which is what I'm going to do today, licensing, how to update your license, changelog, etc. Now, each one of these samples, so for example, if I click display density, you can toy around with the samples. This one has filtering on it, probably some other features as well, like sorting, but it also lets me set the display density on the control like so. So you can kind of like get a feel for each one of these guys. Now, the nice thing is all of the samples have a edit in code sandbox button. So I opened up one of these already in Code Sandbox. So this is the same display density example. And you can see that it has the source code. It has all of the code here. Like this is the file structure, all the code that makes up the sample, and then the running sample here. You can fork this. It links in with your GitHub. You can kind of do whatever you want at this point. You actually have that running sample. And then all of these samples as well are in GitHub. So you can get them from GitHub at GitHub/igniteui-react, or I think it's /igniteui samples, or you can get them directly from whatever you happen to be looking at, which is probably the way that you're going to approach this. Now, today I'm going to be using the CLI. In order to get to the CLI, you go to npmjs.com and then just search for the igniteui CLI. The important thing here is if I scroll down, you need to use one of these RCs that we shipped a few weeks ago. If you have a CLI that's older, like a 12.0, it's really not going to work because we don't have the new React grid stuff in there. But anything forward of this 12.0.7 RC0, moving upwards here to these 12.1s, and we have some 13.0s, etc. But those will work with exactly what I'm going to show you today. So make sure you install the right CLI. Fast forward a couple weeks, it won't matter. You just install Ignite UI CLI and you're good to go. If you don't know how to do that, like if I go to 12.07 RC, you can see here it tells me what I need to install. You just copy that and you just paste it into your terminal, and that will install this stuff for you. So let's go ahead and try that out. I'm going to open up my terminal here. I am at my C-webinar folder. I've already done the npm install Ignite UI CLI. So in order to activate the CLI, you can just click IG, and then this is a step-by-step. Of course, you can use any framework for this. So I'm going to give this a webinar demo 1 name, and it says, hey, what do you want to use? Angular, jQuery, React, or Web Components? Let's do React. Which React do you want to use? We have several React products. We have React jQuery wrappers. We have our deprecated Ignite UI for React, and then the Ignite UI for React TypeScript, which is what you want. So let's go ahead and do that. I can do a base project, an empty project, or the default top navigation. So this is just up to you. You can experiment with this to see what the output looks like. I'm going to do a default top navigation. I don't want to complete and run. I want to add a component. And of course, today is all about grids. So let's go ahead and add a component called grid1. Hit the enter key. I want to add another component. We will add a chart just for the heck of it. We'll add the category chart, and we'll call this guy chart1. Hit enter, and then we will complete and run. It offers me the default host port, which is fine. Hit enter, and this is going to go ahead and install those npm packages. So this started my project at 127.0.0.1, the same port. Let's go ahead and click that, and we will see what the results are in the browser. So I've got my home page. If I go to grid 1, you can see I've got a couple grids here. They look great. And I've got my default chart, which also looks great. So what I want to do, though, is I want to start editing this guy. So let's minimize this. And I am going to close this running terminal. And we'll change to webinar-demo1, and we'll open this up in Visual Studio Code. So here's my project in Visual Studio Code. We'll go to the terminal, and I'm just going to do an npm start, and we will look at this guy running again in the browser, and it looks great. So I've got my 2 grids. And if we jump back over to Visual Studio Code and I drill into source app, you can see I've got chart grid, drill into my grid, there's grid 1. And this is probably the most straightforward code you'll see. We have the top grid here, the IGR grid, which has auto-generate set to false, which means we're going to provide it the columns. And it should be bound to data. What is data? Data is getting imported from ./data, which is here. So we just have a bunch of different product information here. So if we go back to our grid, we are declaring the columns that we want to bind, and then it'll just bind that. And then the second grid, a little bit different. IGR grid, auto-generate equals true, bound to data. So it's going to just bind all of those columns to the grid, which is what we see here. So what we want to do is we're going to let's delete this top grid, and we are going to customize this bottom grid. And what I want to do is use data from my excel2json.io, and I want to use this customers data. So if I look here, this will be an endpoint, and if I just paste this endpoint into another browser window here, we'll see what it looks like, and that's what we're going to bind to this grid. So let's minimize that. I'm going to muck around with this bottom grid here. So let's go ahead and delete this top grid. So we'll get rid of the IGR grid. And as we're doing this, we'll see that this is updating. And so when we reopen this, we'll see that this grid is going to change. And we're going to have to modify a few things here, but this is auto-generating equals true. And we're going to start with that. I don't want to use this data. What I've done is I've created some code snippets for this webinar. And so it has the webinar prefix, and I've added a function that will pull data from that Excel2JSON endpoint. So that is where we're going to get our data. And you can see I've got some squigglies here because I don't have these modules imported. But the beauty of Visual Studio Code, we are going to just import these automatically with Visual Studio Code. And there we go. We're going to use effect and use state. And this is populating something called data 1. So if I scroll down and I change data here equal to data 1, my app recompiles, and we'll go back here. We'll do a refresh, and we can see we've got data 1 here. The grid doesn't seem to quite like whatever CSS is there. I think we could mess with the CSS, but I think we can just say height. So let's try this. Height equals, and let's call it maybe 700 pixels or something like that. And we'll go back and we'll take a look, and it looks pretty decent. And of course, if I'm using App Builder, all of this is done for free. And if I'm a CSS expert, I probably would have went into the CSS and modified it. But this is great for what we want to do today. So we talked about theming. So let's first look at the themes. So I'm going to go back to VS Code. And if I go up here, you can see that we're importing light bootstrap here. And why don't we do this? Why don't we just kind of put this guy here, and we'll hide this. And as we change things, this grid will actually change. So let's just change the word dark or light to dark. And just like that, I've got my grid is now dark bootstrap. I actually like dark fluent. So let's go ahead and say dark fluent. So yeah, change a little bit. You can see the back color's slightly different. Now, if I change this to light fluent, you can see here I have my light fluent, and that kind of matches more the style. So why don't we leave it at light for now, and we'll keep customizing what this grid looks like. So of course, the Ignite UI grid has all kinds of features and capabilities. So as of now, this is all we're doing to generate this grid over here. And as I scroll down, you can see I've got a bunch of data here. I could just drag this guy down, and you can see all that stuff there, but there's really nothing on my column. So I don't have any properties set on this grid, which is what I really need to do at this point. So I'm just going to go ahead, and the beautiful thing is all of this is in the doc. So I'm going to set column moving equal to true, like so. And I'm going to set the row selection. And you can see this is also bringing up everything in autocomplete. I didn't do anything for that because we have TypeScript typings. Everything is going to come up for free. So let's do row selection, and this is going to equal to single, like so. And now my grid updates. And so as of now, you can see I checked the box. I've got row selection and I've got column moving. So my grid is starting to come together. It looks pretty good, but there's a lot more we can do here. So I really want to get my Excel style filter going. So I'm going to hit the enter key here, and I want to do filter mode. And what is my filter mode? My filter mode is going to be Excel style filter, like so. Usually when you're working with the grid and you're working with data, you must provide the primary key of the grid. If you don't, you might see some weird behaviors, like it'll select multiple rows at once. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and set my primary key. And my primary key is going to be customer ID, because that is the field in my data that is the primary key, which is this customer ID right here. And we'll see that the filter mode isn't there because I need to set allow filtering equal to true. And so once we have allow filtering equal to true, you'll notice that now I've got the filter drop down, which is amazing. So at this point, I can do things like move right and left. Let's say I want to pin this column. You can see that now that column is pinned to the left-hand side. If I go back to city, maybe I just want to see a few of these cities. We'll just do an apply, and there my cities are filtered out. So all of that I literally just got for free, just adding a single property on a grid, which is actually really, really slick. And what we can do if we resize this grid, resize the page, and I push this like this, you can see that we've got the pinned column on the left-hand side. I can go here, I can unpin the column, and our grid is back to where we expect. So why don't we just leave that the way it is? I'll put this over here, and we'll kind of slide this over a little bit so we can kind of go back and forth. The next thing I want to do now is set some properties on the columns themselves, which means I need to remove the auto generate equals true. So let's make this false. And now I need to go ahead and add all of those columns within the grid. So I am going to put this guy here, and we are going to close out this IGR grid. And now within here, I need to add some of those grid columns. So I'm going to go to webinar, and I'm going to say grid columns. And you can see I've just quickly added some of these grid columns. Here's what's important. Well, I have the field name, the header, and the data type. So all I'm doing here is the base information to just display exactly what I want in these fields, but I want to do more. So for example, on this customer ID, what I can do is set the has summary field equal to true. And you'll see what this looks like now in the grid on the right-hand side. So let's make this a little bit longer. And you can see now I have count equals 91 on that particular column. So that went ahead and added a summary field. Now, if I go to my overflow to get the Excel style filter, I have some options here on pinning, hiding, etc. But I want to enable sorting on a few columns. So all I need to do is set the sortable property. So we'll do sortable equals true. And I'll just copy this a few times and you'll see what this looks like. So we'll do a paste and a paste and another paste. And then you can see here I have the sort indicator, so I can do a multi-column sort or a single column sort, however I would like this to work. So we have that tri-state there for sortable. And then the next thing is, what I think is really slick, is I can set a default property to pinned. So I want this IGR column to always be pinned. So I'm going to say pinned equals, and you can see that I don't really have to think too much. I can just start typing P and I get my IntelliSense. And then look, now I have a pinned column on the left-hand side. Very, very cool. And then I want to do grouping as well. There's a couple fields that make sense for grouping. So contact title, maybe city, maybe region. So we can go over to contact title and I can say groupable, and I want this to equal to true. And I'm going to copy this and I'll paste it in a couple other columns. So we've got city. Let's do region. So country maybe, sure, why not? And there we go. So now you'll see I have the group by area that showed up. And now when I grab contact title and I can take it up here, and now you can see that I have all of the groups for this. And maybe I want to do contact title by city. And now I have contact title and then cities in between. If I want to change the arrangement of these guys, I can do like so. I can select or expand all and collapse all. It just looks great. So let's go ahead and get rid of city here, and we'll just leave this at contact title. Or actually, we'll get rid of it. So there we go. So now we've got a row selection. I've got a pinned column. I've got my Excel style filter. Now, what else is awesome is export to Excel. So how do we do an export to Excel? Well, let's just go ahead and we'll bring up our code snippets, and I've got this IGR grid toolbar options. I'll just import this from the igniteui-grids like so, and our Excel exporter. There we go. Just took a second to figure that out with Visual Studio Code's IntelliSense, but now I've got my export. So let's go ahead and export this grid to Excel. So we'll open up this guy. There's my exported grid. What's even cooler, I show this demo a lot, so you'll have to excuse me if you've seen it already, but I've grouped some rows. I have a pinned column. Let's go ahead. We'll export this guy. And now not only do I have all of my grouped columns, but at the same time, you can see that we have the pinned column on the left for customer ID. So super slick. Our Excel export to Excel is very advanced, and your end users will absolutely love it. So another neat feature with the grid is the ability to group columns. So in this case, we've got a bunch of columns that make up the address area. So what we can do is simply add an IGR column group. And the column group has a property called header. So we're going to say header equals address information. And I'm going to take this guy and we will put him after country like so. And here again, you can see the red squiggly. Just go to your quick fix, update your imports. And now I have a column group. So there's my company name, contact info, and then my address information is in a column group. And there's my phone and my fax information outside of the column group. And in fact, you can't really see it that well. Let's see if it looks better in material. So yeah, the material has a slightly different shade on the border. So it's very clear here that we have the address information. And let's do a material dark. Material dark's always nice. It has some very vibrant colors. You can see I've got my pink. And when I select rows, everything really looks slick. And then another killer feature of the grid is we have the toolbar. So I've got the export options for CSV and Excel here, but we also have something called the action strip. So I'm going to go ahead and just add in my action strip here. So let's move this guy over and we'll make it look a little bit better. You can see here again, I need to use my quick fix. So we'll import the action strip and the grid pinning actions into the igniteui-grids like so. And if we scroll up, you'll see that we're just continuing to append to this import statement here. But I also need to let the grid know it is editable. So here I am going to say row editable like so. We should be good to go. So let's go back over here. Let's do a refresh, make sure we're in good shape. Now you'll see I have my hover, so my row actions are here. I'm going to click the edit button. Now you can see I'm in edit mode on the grid. So let's call this guy the boss man like so. And his name is Constantine. And that's it. I hit enter and that applies the edit. Now I don't have CRUD actions hooked up to my data source. This is a read-only data source. So when I refresh, this is going to go away. But that's all you need to do to go into edit mode. And in fact, too, as I hover over, I can delete rows like so. And all I would do then is just call my web API to apply the CRUD. And now you'll see when I do a refresh, the grid is actually back to where it's supposed to be. The other thing that you notice here is some of these guys like company name, contact title, they have the ... You can set the width on columns as well. So let's do the width here equal to 200 pixels. And we'll kind of copy that a few times, and you just see what the results look like as I do this on the right-hand side. Width in there, paste, like so. And so you can see now I got more breathing room in my grid. It looks a little bit nicer. And that's basically it. So here I've created a full-featured grid. I have editing. I have row selection, like so. I have group by. I have export to Excel. I have my hover actions. I have column pinning. I have column groups, and the list goes on. So when you go back and you start looking at all of the capabilities that you have here with this grid, there's a lot that you can do. And you see everything that I did here was with minimal effort. I'm basically setting properties. So it's very easy to get this stuff done. So hopefully you get a great idea here how to get started with the grid. Start with the CLI and then just build on it. And then you can move that into your own application. Okay, so now hopefully you have a good idea of what you can do with the React grid. That was a relatively quick demo, but you saw how easy it is to configure the grid to do everything from grouping, export to Excel, adding that toolbar, doing column groups, basically everything that you would need to build an amazing user experience for your end users. And I started with the CLI, and then the rest of it was just adding some properties. Of course, I had some code snippets to make sure we didn't spend time watching me typing. But the whole point is it is super easy to get started with that grid. Now let's go ahead and answer the poll questions. We talk about the poll a lot. The poll does drive our roadmaps, and it drives like what we know about how you're thinking. So answering these questions is really important, and we do appreciate your time. So that popped up. I think JJ or Jesse popped that up. And so please answer that as we wrap up, and I'll stay online afterwards to make sure all the questions are answered, as well as you have time to answer those poll questions. So what's your next step? Go ahead and get started today. I showed you the links and how to get to the demos and samples, how to download the product. Everything's up on NPM anyway, so it's super easy to get started. If you just install the Ignite UI CLI and you do exactly what I showed you in today's demo, you're going to have the same experience that I just had. And then you can go crazy looking at samples and figuring out how to use the product yourself. All of the samples I showed you, of course, are in Code Sandbox. You can download any one of those samples and start playing with it as well. And then, yes, the Ignite UI CLI docs, which I showed you to get started. There's a couple docs up there on just getting started with React in general, getting started with the CLI. I highly recommend, until we get that code generation going in App Builder, the CLI is the easiest way to get started with React. I mean, there's no doubt about it. Super simple. You can just type in a few commands, and there you've got like at least a base template of everything that you need. And then you can add components yourself. The one I showed you today, we had a chart and a grid, and it looked great. And it was just sort of a starter for what then I would do to take my application to the next level. So with that, I want to thank everyone. We'll continue to answer questions online. But if you have any questions, you want to follow up, jasonb@infragistics.com is my email. And I want to thank you again for attending this webinar today. We appreciate your time. And we know you have a lot of choices for your time. And we hope that this short example of what the React Grid can do for your customers and your applications helps you make a decision to try out Ignite UI today. So thanks again, everyone. And we will see you at the next webinar.